The Thing in the Woods. It was late when Sarah decided to take the shortcut through the woods. The sun had already set, and the trees looked like tall, dark shadows against the fading light. She knew the woods were creepy at night, but she was tired and just wanted to get home. Her phone's flashlight barely lit the path, and the sound of her footsteps on the dry leaves made her nervous. Every little noise, the rustling of branches, the hoot of an owl, made her heart race. She had heard the stories. Of course, everyone in town talked about the woods. They said strange things happened there. People went missing. Animals were found dead, their bodies torn apart. Some even claimed to see a figure watching them from between the trees, something that looked almost human, but wasn't. Sarah didn't believe in those stories. She thought they were just tales to scare kids. But as she walked deeper into the woods, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The first sign that something was wrong was the smell. It hit her suddenly, like rotting meat mixed with something sweet and sickly. She covered her nose with her hand and tried to breathe through her mouth, but the smell was everywhere. Then she heard it, a low, guttural growl, like an animal but deeper, more human. She stopped walking and looked around, her flashlight shaking in her hand. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Is someone there?" There was no answer, just the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. But the footsteps weren't hers. They were coming from behind her, slow and deliberate. She turned around, shining her light into the darkness. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then just at the edge of the light, she saw a pair of glowing yellow eyes. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The eyes were too high off the ground to belong to an animal. They were human height. She took a step back, and the eyes moved closer. She could see the shape of a figure now, tall and thin, its body hunched over like it was crawling on all fours. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, and its mouth was twisted into a grin that showed too many teeth. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. The flashlight bounced in her hand, casting wild shadows on the trees. She could hear the thing behind her, its footsteps quick and heavy. It wasn't running. It was stalking her like it knew she couldn't escape. Sarah didn't know how long she ran. Her legs burned, and her lungs felt like they were on fire. She didn't dare look back. She just kept running, hoping she was going the right direction. Finally, she saw the edge of the woods and the lights of her house in the distance. She sprinted toward it, tears streaming down her face. She didn't stop until she was inside, slamming the door shut and locking it behind her. She leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold her phone. She called her best friend, Emily, and told her what had happened. Emily listened quietly, then said, "Sarah, you need to be careful. That thing in the woods, it's not an animal. It's a skinwalker." "A what?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A skinwalker," Emily repeated. "It's a creature from Native American legends. It can shape-shift into animals or even people, but it's not human. It's evil, and once it sees you, it won't stop until it gets you." Sarah didn't want to believe it, but she couldn't shake the image of those glowing eyes and that twisted grin. She spent the rest of the night sitting on her couch, staring at the door, too scared to sleep. The next morning, Sarah tried to convince herself it had just been her imagination. She told herself she had been tired, that the shadows had played tricks on her. But deep down, she knew the truth. That thing in the woods was real, and it had seen her. She decided to stay away from the woods after that. She took the long way home, even though it added an extra 20 minutes to her walk. But no matter how far she stayed from the trees, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of her eye, or hear footsteps behind her when no one was there. And at night, she would dream of those glowing yellow eyes and that horrible grin. A week later, Sarah was walking home from work when she saw it. She was on the main road, far from the woods, when a figure stepped out from behind a tree. At first, she thought it was a person. It looked like a man, tall and thin, wearing a dark coat. But as it got closer, she realized something was wrong. Its movements were too stiff, too unnatural. And its face was wrong. The skin was pale and stretched too tight, and its mouth was twisted into that same horrible grin. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The thing tilted its head to the side, like it was studying her. Then it spoke, its voice low and raspy. "Sarah," it said, "you can't run forever." She turned and ran, her legs moving on their own. She didn't look back. She just ran, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She didn't stop until she was home, slamming the door shut and locking it behind her. That night, Sarah sat on her couch, staring at the door. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't call the police. They would never believe her. She couldn't tell her friends. They would think she was crazy. She was alone, and the thing outside knew it. She heard a noise outside, like something scratching at the door. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The scratching stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then she heard a voice, low and raspy, coming from right outside the door. "Sarah," it said, "let me in." She didn't answer. She just sat there, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. The scratching started again, louder this time. She could hear the wood splintering under the thing's claws. She knew it was only a matter of time before it got in. The next morning, Sarah's neighbors found her house empty. The door was wide open, and there were deep scratches in the wood. Inside, the furniture was overturned, and there were dark stains on the floor. But there was no sign of Sarah. A few days later, a hunter found something in the woods. It was a pile of clothes, torn and covered in blood. The clothes belonged to Sarah. But there was no body, no sign of what had happened to her. The people in town started talking again. They said the woods were cursed, that something evil lived there. They said it wasn't an animal or a person. It was something worse, something that could wear the skin of its victims and walk among them, unseen. And sometimes late at night, people would see a figure standing at the edge of the woods. It looked almost human, but its eyes glowed yellow in the dark, and its mouth was twisted into a horrible grin. The curse of the Navajo Nation. The desert wind whispered secrets through the sparse juniper trees, chilling the exposed skin on Deputy Dale's arms. He pulled his jacket tighter, his gaze sweeping across the vast, empty expanse of the Navajo Nation. The radio crackled to life, dispatch relaying a frantic call about strange noises and livestock mutilations near the Black Mesa. Dale sighed, the familiar knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He'd heard the whispers, the old stories about skinwalkers, malevolent witches who could transform into animals. He'd always dismissed them as folklore, but lately, things had been different. The dirt road snaked through the mesas, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of blood orange and deep violet. Dale's headlights cut through the growing darkness, illuminating the twisted shapes of the ancient rocks. He reached the Peterson Ranch, a desolate cluster of buildings huddled against the looming mesa. The air hung heavy with a metallic scent, thick and cloying. A grizzled man, his face etched with fear, met him at the gate. It was John Peterson, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "Deputy, thank God you're here. It's happening again." Dale followed Peterson to barn, the metallic smell intensifying. Inside, the scene was gruesome. 2 cows lay dead, their bodies mutilated with surgical precision. There was no blood, just gaping wounds and missing organs. Dale felt a shiver crawl down his spine. This wasn't the work of coyotes or mountain lions. This was something else. "It started a few weeks ago," Peterson said, his voice trembling. "Strange noises at night, like something screaming. Then the livestock started disappearing. We found them like this, drained, empty." Dale examined the carcasses, his flashlight beam dancing over the unnatural cuts. He knew what the locals would say. Skinwalker. He tried to push the thought away, to find a rational explanation, but the evidence or lack thereof was unsettling. As Dale continued his investigation, the nights grew more disturbing. He'd hear the chilling cries echoing through canyons, see fleeting shadows moving just beyond the reach of his headlights. The livestock mutilations continued. Spreading to neighboring ranches, fear gripped the community, whispers of skinwalkers growing louder. One night, Dale was patrolling the back roads when he saw it. A large, dark shape loped across the road, its eyes glowing an unnatural yellow. He slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature paused, staring at him with an unnerving intelligence, then vanished into the brush. Dale grabbed his shotgun, his hand trembling. He knew with a chilling certainty what he had just seen. He followed the creature's tracks, the prints unlike anything he'd ever encountered. They were large like a wolf's, but with an oddly human-like gait. The tracks led him deep into the canyons, towards the shadow base of Black Mesa. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable sense of dread. He found a small cave hidden amongst the rocks. A faint fire flickered within, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. He approached cautiously, his shotgun raised. As he peered inside, he saw a figure hunched over the flames. It was human-shaped, but covered in thick, matted fur. The creature turned, its eyes burning into Dale's soul. Its face was a grotesque mass of animal and human features, its teeth sharp and pointed. Dale froze, paralyzed by fear. The creature rose, its movements fluid and unnerving. It let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated deep within Dale's chest. He knew he had to do something, but his body refused to obey. Suddenly, the creature lunged, its claws extended. Dale fired his shotgun, the blast echoing through the canyon. The creature shrieked, a sound that sent chills down Dale's spine. It stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Dale fired again and again until the creature collapsed, its body twitching. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the pounding of Dale's heart. He approached the creature cautiously, his flashlight beam illuminating its grotesque form. As the smoke cleared, he saw the creature begin to shift, the fur receding, the animal features melting away. Beneath the monstrous disguise, Dale saw the face of a woman, her eyes filled with ancient malevolent hatred. He recognized her. It was Mary Begay, a local medicine woman who had always kept to herself. The whispers had been true. She was a skinwalker. Dale stumbled back, his mind reeling. He had killed a human being, a woman he had known, albeit distantly. But what he had witnessed, the horror he had faced, left him with no doubt that he had done what he had to do. He radioed for backup, his voice shaking. He told them what he had seen, what he had done. He knew they wouldn't believe him, not fully, but he also knew he couldn't keep it to himself. He had faced the darkness, the ancient evil that lurked in the shadows of the Navajo Nation. He had survived, but a part of him, a part of his innocence, had died in that dark cave. The desert wind continued to whisper its secrets, and Dale knew, with a chilling certainty, that the stories were true. The skinwalkers were real, and they walked among them. The following days were a blur. The FBI investigated, but the official report attributed the livestock mutilations to wild animals and Mary Begay's death to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Dale tried to tell them the truth, but they dismissed the story as stress-induced hallucinations. He was placed on leave, his mental stability questioned. He returned to his small, isolated cabin, haunted by the memory of Mary Begay's transforming face. He couldn't escape the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting. The desert wind whispered its secrets, and Dale knew, deep in his heart, that it had only scratched the surface of a darkness far older and more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. He had faced a skinwalker, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he would face him again. The fight was not over. It had just begun, and he was alone. The vast, empty expanse of Navajo Nation held its breath, waiting for the next act in this ancient, terrifying drama. The whispers on the wind grew louder, carrying the chilling promise of more terror to come. The skinwalkers were still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting.